The United States continues its unwavering support for Israel as the Biden administration announces a massive $8 billion arms deal with the Israeli occupation forces. The deal includes air-to-air missiles, artillery shells, and smart bombs, making what is likely the administration's final major act of support for Israel. Despite ongoing accusations of war crimes and violence of international law, the United States has consistently provided military aid, worsening the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. As President Biden prepares to leave office and President-elect Donald Trump prepares to take over, many are asking, will the United States support for Israel continue at this pace, or could there be a shift in policy? What does this arms deal mean for Gaza, the region, and the future of the United States-Israeli relations? Welcome to In Depth. The New York Times has reported that the United States State Department informed Congress of an $8 billion arms deal with Israel, which may be the final such sale under the Biden administration. Despite growing opposition within his own party, President Biden has moved forward with the sale, which includes bombs, artillery shells, and missiles. The New York added that some members of Congress, especially Democrats, have opposed continued arms sales to Israel due to the humanitarian toll in Gaza, where over 45,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli actions. In contrast, Republicans have largely supported the sale, while President Biden has occasionally voiced mild criticism of Israel's actions, including delaying specific arms shipments to discourage further violence. His administration has continued to defend Israel. However, the situation is expected to shift with the incoming Trump administration. The U.S. government's recent notification to Congress regarding an $8 billion arms sale to Israel reflects a broader pattern of military support that has fueled Israel's violent campaign against Palestinians in Gaza.
In the final days of the Biden administration, the U.S. Department of State has notified Congress of its intention to approve an $8 billion arms sale to Israel. The deal includes air-to-air missiles, Hellfire missiles, artillery shells, and bombs. It still requires approval from both the House and Senate committees, but represents a continuation of Washington's long-standing military aid to the Israeli occupying forces. The United States, Israel's largest arms supplier, has provided over $22 billion in military assistance since the war in Gaza began on October 7, 2023. This latest arms shipment is part of a consistent pattern. In August 2023, the U.S. approved the sale of $20 billion worth of fighter jets to Israel. More recently, billions in emergency military aid have continued to flow, with the U.S. accounting for 69% of Israel's military imports. The ongoing supply of weapons has directly contributed to the killing of over 45,000 Palestinians. This arms deal carries particular significance, as it is likely the last one approved by the Biden administration before President-elect Donald Trump takes office. The question now arises, will U.S. support for Israel, which fuels aggression against Gazans, shift under Trump?
For more analysis on the situation, we are joined from Washington by Lori Watkins, former advisor to President Barack Obama, and Hassan Naimi, a very political analyst, and a very good day, and welcome to the show. Mr. Watkins, Miss Watkins, the United States has announced an $8 billion arms sale to Israel, including air-to-air missiles, bombs, and artillery shells. How do you think this deal will affect the ongoing violence in Gaza and the region as a whole?
Greetings to your viewers. Thank you for having me on your program. Well, I will tell you that some Democratic members in the House and Senate that I'm speaking to right now are furious over this action by President Biden to go through the State Department, because it will need congressional approval from the House and Senate. So they do not feel that they're going to be able to support this, whether it was under a President Biden or a Trump. But this is just a continuation of one of the last final moves that President Biden was trying to show his support to Israel, not necessarily to Netanyahu, but the commitment to Israelis, that the United States is strong in its commitment to Israel being able to defend itself, and the United States in turn supplying it with what it needs to do that, which are heavy bombs, which are artillery shells, which are munitions for fighter jets and attack helicopters, etc. This could have major ramifications for those individuals on the ground. As you mentioned, it's going to be more than 45,000 Palestinians who lost their lives. In our estimates, it's probably double that. But here in Washington, this is going to be a true test to Donald Trump and his allies in the House, I will say specifically, because that's different than the Senate, his allies in the House, of whether or not he's going to continue to support Israel in the way that he has said publicly on the campaign trail, which helped get him reelected here into the 117th Congress. And we will see if push the House Speaker Mike Johnson, who just got reelected just on Friday here in Washington, whether or not that's going to be something that President Trump wants the House to bless in order to go over to the Senate. That's a lot of money, as he is saying that the United States is not going to continue footing the bill, even for our allies around the world. So this will be interesting. Also, let's not forget that Marco Rubio will be the incoming new Secretary of State. Whether or not he's going to support this and tell President Trump that this is something that he needs to message to his members of Congress and his party that he needs to bless. Stay tuned.
Ms. Watkin, why is President Biden at this stage, and as he is awaiting a few days to leave this presidency, adamant on continuing to support Israel further on the atrocities and genocides that are taking place in Gaza at this point, and spending all this amount of money for the cause of Israel?
The only thing that I can come up with is a legacy option, that this lever that President Biden wants to make sure that he is able to do as many things as possible before he leaves, which included appointing all of those judges, clemency for parolees, people that were incarcerated, etc. These are things that he's been doing over the last few weeks, some of them making records as the first time this has ever been done, or the largest amount, etc. And I think that President Biden, he knows that he did not do as much in the time that he had. He had over a year to help pull this together. And I know that he did the best that he could with his National Security Council, trying to broker this deal, a ceasefire, getting hostages returned and back home, as many of them as possible, and to end this conflict over there. But instead it is spread into neighboring nations. Yes, Iran has perhaps become weakened, perhaps Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. but look at the consequences. Look at the thousands upon thousands of Palestinian and innocent civilians and children that have been killed, and what the ramifications, the second and third order of effects are going to be.
Okay, Ms. Watkins, I'll come back to you.
Area is going to look like moving forward.
I'll come back to you, and we're going to comment again on the word legacy with regards to Biden. But now, Mr. Naimi, a very good day, sir. With continuing accusations of war crimes against Israel, how do you view the United States government's stance in supplying such advanced weaponry to Israel as it enters the third year of its war on Gaza?
Well, irrespective of any international condemnation, irrespective of any judgments or summons or considerations on the part of international courts, the relationship between the U.S. government, not just the U.S. administration, and Israel is ironclad. This is not necessarily based on U.S. national interests, although clearly many advocates of this relationship would argue that it is. But even those who recognize that actually the proposition that the relationship is based on U.S. interest is extremely weak, if not faulty, accept the fact that the connection between the U.S. government and the Israeli government is here to stay. It is solid, based on subjective and objective considerations. In any case, what the U.S. has consistently wanted is for Israel to preserve superiority, a qualitative edge. And therefore, the weapons sent to Israel, while Israel is engaged in acts of violence that the U.S. has effectively endorsed, irrespective of the few complaints here and there, just verbal complaints, while the supply of weapons has not stopped on the part of the administration, while Israel continues its campaign of what has been termed as being genocide, but in any case, it is war crimes at the very least. What we have is a U.S. administration that, by virtue signaling, by actions that are consistent with U.S. policy, provides Israel with what amounts to it maintaining its superiority, its qualitative edge. Mind you, Israel understands superiority as being supremacy, not just superiority, and therefore what applies to it does not apply to others. What applies to others does not apply to it, and therefore behaves exactly as if it can commit any crime with impunity. And this has been the record because it has the protection of the United States. So there's no surprise here. Joe Biden himself, throughout the past year, has shown consistently that he is a very reliable advocate of the Israeli position. Has covered Israeli lives, from the beheaded babies to command bases under hospitals. He has provided throughout, he was a mouthpiece for the Israeli narrative, irrespective of how propagandistic it has been. So there's no surprise here. Is there some ulterior motive, such as maybe hoping that Netanyahu will indulge him with a partial deal that would release some American hostages, among others, and therefore will be able to claim on the pardon.
Mr. Naimi, we have reached the conclusion that the case with Netanyahu is not the hostages and is not the detainees and is not what Netanyahu is targeting at this point. Netanyahu is targeting, sir, as we talk now, for 3 nights, civilians in Gaza have trespassed over 147 civilians that were killed in bombardments on civilian areas, not on otherwise areas. So what Biden is doing at this point is really, despite the fact of that he is an ally of the United States, it doesn't make sense at all. $8 billion, what is the plan?
First of all, in terms of the actual American assessment, as opposed to the kind of the verbal noise that we hear from time to time from some American officials, including Blinken, including Murphy, including others, Matthew Miller, the real American position is that for for the bombardment, for the crimes that are being committed in Gaza. They won't term them as crimes, clearly. To stop, Hamas has to surrender the hostages, and actually Hamas has to surrender. This is the de facto position. So the US has never acted in the past year as a negotiator, as a mediator. It has acted as an agent of Israel. This is the Israeli position and the American position. I mean, Hamas's position is, let's end the war and we'll provide the hostages. The American and the US, the American and the Israeli position has been provide the hostages and then we'll end you, not end the war. And this has been consistent.
Okay, sir, I'll be back to you again. But Ms. Watkins, this arms deal is one of the final actions by President Biden's administration. What message does it send about the United States' unwavering support for Israel, especially as Biden prepares to leave office? And of course, I have to mention here, when you mentioned that this is going to be legacy for US President Biden, this is going to be history, Ms. Watkins, and history writes everything.
Well, to build off of that, I think two things can be correct or the same at the same time, right? Which is that President Biden wanted to show and declare his own personal commitment to the state of Israel after decades and decades long of a career supporting Israel and its policies that he has been a major part of, but then continuing on to show as he leaves office to try to send a message across the world, especially to those terrorist organizations, and I think Iran and any of those terrorist proxy organizations as well, that the United States, if you mess with our allies, we are going to support them, whether that's Israel, Ukraine, etc. And President Biden wanted to send a very clear message about that. It comes with a huge amount of controversy. Yes, I would agree with that. I'm very well aware of that. And I would not agree with this recent policy decision by President Biden to make this arms deal, but I understand it politically and again, as I said, for his legacy. But it will be, in my opinion, one of the stains of this Biden.
So you think it's going to be a stain in his history, Ms. Watkins?
Say again?
You think it's going to be a stain in the history of Joe Biden?
Absolutely. I think Afghanistan, the withdrawal and the way that that was handled, and I would say this handling over the past year since this conflict, and that the administration was not able to bring some sort of peace, whatever that looked like.
Ms. Watkins,
of getting the hostages returned, that was not accomplished, and it's very unfortunate. And I want to say one more thing. This is very important. Politically speaking, when you are running for re-election, or if you think you are, you absolutely, no matter what anyone says, you make decisions based on that, political decisions. And unfortunately, at the end, all of the decisions for the last 3.5 years that President Biden made, a lot of them were through the lens of I'm running for re-election. And then when he decided not to, I think that there is a huge amount of regret that he is feeling with things that either he could have done, that had he not decided that he was going to continue on to run for re-election, that he would have done things differently. And that's how I will leave the last words on this program.
Okay, Mr. Watkins, before you leave, please, there is expected to be significant opposition within the Democratic Party regarding the deal, as some members have criticized continued military support in light of the high civilian death toll in Gaza. How do you think Biden is navigating this internal division, and what does this say about his approach to balancing party pressure with long-standing U.S.-Israeli relations?
Well, I will be bold and say this. I was thinking about this before I came on today. He could have taken a different action, which was a presidential executive order, but he decided not to do that. And you can say for whatever reason that he decided not to protect members of Congress, or that he decided that he wanted to throw this back over the fence and make it their problem, because that's what in the end he did. Yes, he's greenlighting through the State Department and sending notification to members of Congress. But at the end of the day, those members of Congress are the ones that are going to have to authorize this deal. So it's going to be put back on them. But the person who it's really going to be put back on is Donald Trump. And whether or not he signals to Mike Johnson for Congress to bless this arms deal to go through or not.
We're going to wait and see. Thank you so much, Lori. The U.S. has been the largest arms supplier to Israel, with billions of dollars worth of military aid sent in recent years. Do you believe this military support is a major factor in the escalation of the conflict and the high civilian death toll in Gaza?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's catch-22 situation. Yes, Israel has the full support of the United States, and therefore, on the basis of that unconditional support, Israel engages in actions that are outrageous, that are criminal, that amount to genocide at the end. But, however, from the point of view of the United States, there is an understanding that Israel faces an existential crisis because the whole Israeli project has been challenged on October 7th, and actually has been challenged really at its roots well before. So the United States has no solution. The United States, despite the talk about a two-state solution and the deal of the century, all of this is just noise. The United States has no vision on how to solve the Israel problem. So it is left up to Israel. Given that it's left up to Israel and Israel is...
Sir, if the United States has no vision, why is it helping Israel? And if Israel has the only vision, and I think Israel has the money, why is the United States being a main ally of Israel, as we read today, and as President Biden decided, unfortunately, to give them $8 billion in aid for military aid, which is... Nobody understands.
The baseline to understand is that the relationship between the United States and Israel is unshakable. The United States will provide all the support to Israel, irrespective of whether that support and whether that provision of support is in the U.S. interest or not. This is not a relationship based on objective, rational interest. It is based on far beyond. And given that the United States has no vision on how to solve the Israel question, it is left to Israel itself to do it. And the role of the United States here is to provide the unlimited support. Now, Israel has decided that it is going to go on the assault because it feels that it has been assaulted. So the role of the United States is to provide the support for that assault, irrespective. I mean, what we have, the only thing that we could believe in terms of what this U.S. administration, the outgoing U.S. administration had said, is that it prefers not to have a regional war. But even that was immediately phrased. We do not want a regional war. We urge Israel not to engage in a regional war. But if Israel decides to engage in a regional war, we have its back. We support it. That's the U.S. position and will continue to be under Trump. Anyone who's expecting a change from Trump has to recalibrate their expectations because the only change is going to be a change in style. While
Sir, this is the question I was just going to ask you about President-elect Trump, and he made clear in his statements that he is going to be backing Israel, unfortunately, as well.
Trump will want peace. Trump will want an end to the war. However, the definition of peace and the definition of ending the war these two definitions pass by Israel. They are along the Israeli standard. Peace means the defeat of the parties opposing Israel. That's peace for Trump. It is not peace, let's make a deal. The deal in question follows victory. This is what Trump himself has said. Trump has said that Israel is too small of a country. We have to think on how to expand it. Expanding it means annexations. Let's remember that Trump gave Israel the gift of the Golan Heights as if it belonged to him or to the United States. And he's likely, very much so, likely to give Israel the gift of the West Bank in what comes next, or chunks of the West Bank at least. So any expectation that Trump is going to change the relationship are not really valid. The change in the relationship is only going to be at the level of style, while the Biden administration had to play for a constituency that it has, that cares about universal values and human rights. Trump does not. Trump's base is in support of Israel from a religious point of view largely. Mark Johnson has said it himself. To be a good Christian, you have to support Israel. And he thinks of himself as being a good Christian. So the notion here, in going forward, we're going to see far more support for Israel, but with talk of peace and talk of resolving the situation. Let's remember what the deal of the century was. The deal of the century was an attempt at liquidating the question of Palestine, liquidating Palestinian rights, while presenting it as if it's a major gift to humanity. So we are likely to see under Trump more of the same. Let's look to who is around Trump. All the people that he has chosen, all the individuals that he has chosen for his foreign policy team are hardcore supporters of Israel, not even, to the right of Netanyahu, to the right of even the chimeric right in Israel. So what we're likely to see is talks such as what Huckabee has said. I do not recognize, there's no occupation, there's a return to the land, there are no settlements, there are villages and towns, Jewish villages and towns that are here on a permanent basis. This is the talk that we have to expect from the Trump administration, and any notion that Trump is going to alter the relationship is really unfounded.
Okay, Mr. Hassan Naimi, political analyst, we cannot thank you enough for joining us from Washington. Thank you for your analysis, and the question remains, what does the arms deal mean for Gaza, the region, and the future of the U.S.-Israeli relation? That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.